Well, by this time it was late October and the ASN was in Washington. At the request of the group, I got the ASN to give us a meeting room, and we held a meeting that evening, and we had probably 250 people there. And so I talked about what we had done and what we might do, and we listened to a lot of people's ideas and recommendations. And so we agreed to form an organization called the Renal Physicians Association. I suggested that name because I didn't want to exclude transplant surgeons and urologists. I wanted to include as many people as we could. The meeting went on for about 2 hours. And at the end of the meeting, I said, well, we need an organization, we need leadership, we need a board. How do we want to go about this? Somebody in the audience said, John, you're doing fine. You just take care of it. And everybody left. So that was how I got to be the first president of the RPA. Well, of course, there was not supposed to be any funding until July of '73. And in June, the draft regulations came out and we had a fit. They didn't know how to handle machinery because their durable medical equipment rules were just inappropriate to what we were doing, and they hadn't changed them. They didn't know what to do with consumables because they'd never had a service that used so much consumables. They didn't know how to pay doctors, and Chris had said, well, I don't charge the patients for anything. They pay for dialysis, and then the facility pays me. And I was not interested in money and fees, so I didn't tell them that, but I must have reinforced it. So then they said that they weren't going to pay doctors, they were just going to pay the facility. And the facilities were universally owned by hospitals, and hospitals weren't going to share the money with us. So nephrologists all over the country said these rules won't do. And it was that outrage that really was the nucleus of what became the Renal Physicians Association.
What happened was, right after the Medicare program began, there was a lot of concern about physician reimbursement, because the original plan in the legislation was to be that they weren't going to pay physicians directly. They were going to pay the dialysis unit, which would pay the physician. Now I mean, I have to say that Scribb and I were probably responsible for that because we didn't really understand private practice medicine at that point. But anyway, that's why we had the Renal Physicians Association. It met on Black Friday, July the 13th, 1973, and that was one of the big topics. But anyway, we organized this organization, which was political, really. I was the second president of it.
The RPA has been a remarkable organization.
Yes.
It has. Your enthusiasm from that first meeting at the ASN, was it justified? I mean, has the RPA done what you thought it would do even in those early days?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't be more pleased where they are. I mean, you know, I joined them in 77 as I recall. Again, you know, you visualize certain episodes in your life. You don't remember all the details. But I remember sitting in my office at DC General and getting a call from John Sadler asking me to serve on the board of directors of the RPA. I remember putting down the phone and saying to myself, what are these guys thinking? Why did they tap me? You know what I mean? Because it was totally out of the blue. The RPA, this is in 77, so they formed, I don't remember exactly when they formed, but it must have been like 74, so it was like 3 years into the thing.
73.
And I'd been at some of the meetings, but I don't remember being particularly visible, etc. So, you know, just in those days, the board were incredibly dedicated under, you know, John Sadler and John Capelli and Chris Blagg as the initial kind of leadership. It was all volunteer. There was no staff. We paid for our own travel. We went into meetings with no agendas. I mean, there was an agenda in, you know, Capelli's head, but there was no, like, background material or something. We had guys like John De Palma, who was a character, I don't know if you remember him, at the meeting. In fact, in many meetings we had multiple meetings at the same meeting because there was no kind of decorum. They used to break up into little groups. As I recall, food and sometimes beer and wine was served during the day. It wasn't that there were parties or anything, but it was kind of a free for all. Everything was done out of the back pockets of the initial leaders. And it was this stage that I think it's fair to say that we began to evolve, from the RPA's point of view, of a focus only on something called the socio-economic financial issues into the quality issues. I remember having discussions with John Sadler and John Bauer about the need for us to do this, and the debate about how we were going to do it and what the importance was. It was clear at that time that the discussion we were having about the quality issue and expanding the scope of what we would do had to do with some clear recognition that we had some limitations on our resources. We had only so much time. And although we didn't have as clear understanding as some of us have now about the need to focus and all that sort of stuff, but it was clear that we had some limitations. Secondly, it was clear it was the right thing to do, so there was no debate about that. But there was also the discussion that the credibility of our message on the socioeconomic issues becomes enhanced if we have a much broader, not totally expansive, but a broader scope that we were going to be dealing with. And that's how we got involved. That's how we eventually landed during that time frame on the need for something called a clinical practice guideline.